wiring and electrics on a model railway. So I'm literally going to explain everything from the very beginning, because I've already sort of had a couple of people ask me on one of my previous videos about wiring. So how does it all work? So let's start at the beginning of the chain. You have your plug socket, and that will send power to your DCC controller or your DC controller, but because mine is DCC, I'm going to explain DCC. So mains power to a DCC controller, which isn't here, but I'm probably going to mount it here. So here I have my DCC controller. That will send a DCC current out to a bus wire. And what I've done here is I've just put in a chop block, and my DCC output from the controller will go into there, and that will then connect onto this red and black wire, which is the beginning of my DCC bus. Now I've started filming this after I've filmed probably some other stuff which you're going to see later, so please ignore all the connections, and if anything doesn't make sense, I'm gonna explain it all later. So my DCC bus starts there, and it's just a red and black wire, and this is 32/0.2 mil wire, and that then starts and goes through one of the pre-holed drills. Ignore these connections, just this is the red and black wire going through, and it goes round, and again ignore the yellow and the blue, I'll explain that in a minute. It goes round, continues round, and that wire goes all the way underneath the baseboard, all the way around the layout, all the way around, back under here, and comes out there and down into here. Now I haven't purposely cut it yet because I'm still sort of pulling it through and getting the right length and stuff, but eventually, once I've got all the connections done, this will then be cut and terminated, and these two wires will not connect anywhere. I'll just pin them up, and they don't need to be terminated in any other way other than just insulating the ends. They don't need to go anywhere. So then that will probably just be pinned up out of the way somewhere over there. So that is your DCC bus wire, and that connects into your DCC controller. And then what you do is, I'm just trying to find one that I've already done earlier, which is going to explain. So here I've got some dropper wires there. So as you can see, I've soldered a wire onto there and a wire onto there. As you can see, this side is going to be negative and this side is going to be positive, black and red. So I decided early on which rail was going to be negative and which rail was going to be positive. It has to be the same all the way through your layout. So for all the way through my layout, the rail closest to me will be the negative, and the rail furthest away will be the positive. So negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive. And because I'm in a loop, that negative rail will always be inside me, so because I'm standing in the middle of it, I haven't got to worry about that. So yeah, this rail will be negative. It has to be the same all the way through, and if you've got any other layout, just follow the rail through and get your head around it. Obviously I can't explain it for your layout if it's different to mine, but just make sure that whichever way you connect it up, the rail that you deem as negative will always be negative, and this will always be positive. Just make sure it's set up that way. So yeah, this is negative, then that comes down, and as you can see, the black wire's negative is closer to me and literally connects to the negative of the DCC bus, and the positive to the positive. Now I've just used colour coded to make it easier, but if you know which rail is the closest to you, you can use any colour wire. So I'd know that the black one is closer to me, so that is negative. So if they were both red, I'd know that that connects to the negative. Just take your time with it and make sure you do wire it up correctly, and there's no point rushing it. So that then provides power to your rails, and I'll explain a little bit later, as I've already filmed a bit before this explaining which bits need to be powered. So if you've got that question, stay tuned, that's coming up. The other thing I'm going to be doing is, as I mentioned earlier, you've got the yellow and blue there. That is going to be my accessory bus. So that is not going to be powering any track, let's say. That's going to be a 16 volt AC dedicated bus, which again just goes all the way round. And that's here for me. Hasn't been connected to anything, but that will eventually connect to my 16 volt AC power supply, which I think I've shown you before. And then that will also sit here, and that's going to be going into this chop block, and that will then send 16 volts AC all the way round my entire layout. So when I do scenery and stuff, I can drop down for power, for lighting and stuff, and it will also partially power my my point motors, but as I'm using the CDU, most of the wiring will be running back to the CDU and the switch box. So that's what those are, and yes, I hope that sort of makes sense. And sort of for the rest of the video, you're going to see me explaining how I wire it all up and go from there. But yeah, so power from your mains into your controller, and then the controller output into your DCC bus wire, which goes all the way around the layout and just terminates on its own wherever. And then your dropper wires come down through the baseboard and connect in to that DCC bus, and then that gives you power. And then obviously point motors get wired up in the correct way to give you power across your points. And then accessory bus, I've used a different colour just so it's less confusing for me whenever I do tap into it, and I know which one's negative and positive. And then that gives me, when I'm doing scenery and lighting and all sorts of other bits that I might want powered through DC, that gives me that option there as well. So yeah, on to the next part. Hey guys, welcome back to Tony's Workstation. So I've now finished putting in all of the point motors. It's been a bit of a long job, but it was a bit tedious as well, so I did it in stages and did it over a few days, so I didn't completely burn myself out, and made sure that I was doing it right, rather than sort of rushing it and getting a slight problem like I've discovered I did when laying the track. I forgot to put in a link between the rail and the joiner rails, so I'm gonna have to solder that one in with a dropper wire basically. So yes, that's one mistake I've found, and I've been through the rest of the track and there's no others, but that's what happens if you try and rush it. Smallest things can escape you. So yeah, all the points are in. I've left, as I said, I've left all the rods in. I haven't trimmed them off yet. What I'm going to do now is start wiring it, but before that I've prepared everything for the dropper wires into the bus wire. So what I've done for this is looked at all the track and worked out what bits will need dropper wires. So for example, you know, I've got say this line here. I probably only need one dropper wire. It's quite long and with a couple of joins, so I might put two in. This is one thing to think about, is obviously you've got to rely on the continuity of the fish plates if you're only going to put one in. But then you can put one on this rail and one on this rail. The other thing is, like here, obviously where I've got a join between this point and this point, obviously where I'm using insulating fish plates, this piece of track will need its own power. So what I've done is just put a little mark there to know that this one will need its own power. And what I've done is I've gone around the whole track and looked and found out what bits need it, and even on sort of like these long straights, long straight pieces with no points, but even though it's a curve, I've still put in, so I've got a dropper wire there, and then I've got another one here, just purely because obviously there are a couple of joins in and around. And then all I've done is just drilled down either side. I've used a 2.5mm drill bit, and if I just grab a bit of wire, you just make sure that the wire that you're using will fit down. Obviously I'm using this gauge wire, so 2.5 is good for me. Obviously if you're using something different, you need to just check the size of the drill bit that you're using. So yeah, and then I've obviously gone around the whole bit and drilled where I need to. With the risers, I've drilled tiny little holes in between the spacers so that the wire will go down from the track down through the gap, if that makes sense, and then down under the baseboard. Like that. So the wire will go in there and down through there. So then when I put scenery on, it will all be hidden as well. And yeah, so that's pretty much where I'm at now. I'm gonna get under the table and start talking you through some dropper wires and soldering them to the rails. Okay, so my soldering isn't great, as you can tell by this first one, which is atrocious. I'm going to redo that, but the other ones aren't too bad. That sparkle stuff, you can see I've just gone over it with the track rubber, just to try and neaten up the solder a bit. But where is it? Oh, there. That's the other side. So what I've done is just obviously run the wire through, and then I just took an old paintbrush, a bit of flux on it, and fluxed the rail, and then tipped the soldering iron, put a bit of solder on the rail, and the flux helps it sit on there, tinned the end of the wire, and then literally just press the wire against it, a pair of tweezers, if I can find the camera, so hold the wire in against the rail, with the other hand solder, heat it up, the two bits of solder on the wire and the rail will then join. Take the heat off, and then once you release the tweezers, it's joined. And it's, I reckon with a bit of practice, they'll come out a little bit better than that. And then obviously just go over the top with a track rubber, just to take off on the excess solder. But because I've got my light on my phone shining down, it's making it all glisten a little bit, but obviously I will give it a good old clean afterwards. But yeah, so that's what I'm going to do, just carry on going around. And then, on my last video, a lot of people have told me that these block connectors aren't very reliable. And I can get where they're coming from, but as soon as I've already got them, I'm going to try them out. I'm doing them on the ones that are easy to access, i.e. ones right at the front, so this here. So I've tried them out, and they seem to be gripped on okay. So this is my bus wire, so my DCC controller is going to output into here, and then this will be the start of the bus wire. They are in it, they are crimped quite tight, and they're not pulling out, but time will tell to see whether it all works when I fire it up. But as soon as they're right there, I'm going to give them a try first, and then if they don't work, then I'm going to try one of the other options that people have suggested. But I don't want to start stripping the wire and soldering it if these are going to work, because if these don't work I can just take them off and then I can solder afterwards. But I'm going to give it a quick go, because they are quite easy to remove if not, and then go from there. Okay, so just to give you an example, I've tried to make all my dropper wires sort of in the same line, so that when it comes to putting them under the table, they're not literally all over the place. I've only got to run the bus wire to one area, so this track needs it because it's after this point, so I put it there. This needs it because it's between the 2 points, so I put it there, sort of underneath it. This track doesn't need it because there's one a little bit further up, and then between these 2 points here, I need it, so I put it there. So almost in the same line with each other. So what I've done is I've got myself a little paintbrush, got a tiny bit of flux on there, and you can see I've just put it on the edge of the rails. I've done it all the way up already. Then heat your soldering iron up to a decent temperature. And I'm just going to try and put this somewhere where you can see. I think this is up to temperature now. Yeah, what the flux will do is it will help the solder flow onto the rail rather than just stick just to the edge of the solder tip there. As you can see, there's a bit of solder on there. Just do the others. When you're doing this as well, try not to excuse me. When you're doing this, try not to heat the sleepers and get the plastic burnt into the solder. So you should end up with something like that. A bit of solder on the track there. And then cut some lengths of wire. And sorry, I put the phone down there. I do need to get some sort of camera stand, I think. And then I just use a set of wire strippers, sort of about that much. Maybe just a smidge more. And then twist the ends up and bend it into a right angle. And what you want to do as well is then get a little bit more flux. Just put a bit of flux on there, not too much. You don't want it caked. Just enough. And then just get a bit of solder on the iron and just let that flow. Onto the wire there so it's tinned. Just like that. And then, again, I do apologise for the angles on this. Hopefully you can see that. I've made the negative, the rail closest to the operating area. Just thread the wire through. And then try and line that up. I do apologise if my hands block your view. I then just use a pair of tweezers to hold it where I want it. Heat the solder back up. I'm just brushing off any excess there, making sure it's flush, and it will look something like that, which I know it isn't brilliant, but it is enough to make a good connection. There, so you can see the black wire here. It's come through, and here's my bus wire. With these, again, I do hope you can see this. As you push, you literally slide it in, and then you need to make sure it slides all the way into the back and can move freely. Then take your wire, put it into the second channel, so it's not too over that, and then get a pair of pliers on that, squeeze that in, make sure that's flush, it's going all the way through, and then clip that in. And that is that. It is quite solid, and then just checking to make sure that it's gone through. And that is there. And then the positive will come down on the other side there with the holes drilled and connect onto that. So that's the dropper wires and how I'm doing them. So I've been steadily working through, powering all my dropper wires. I've still got a bit more to go, and obviously it's still a bit messy underneath here for the moment, but these chop block connectors seem to be working well. I've sort of been testing them as I go along, making sure that the connections are all good, and with a pair of pliers and a bit of forceful crimping, and then just making sure that they are sort of perfectly lined up, I'm actually getting good connections across these wires. So I'm happy with these for now. I think the proof will be obviously when I get round to actually testing trains running across, but I'm quite happy with these so far. But again, if they don't work, I can just trim them off and start again. But as soon as I've got these, and they seem to be relatively quick, I thought they were worth trying out at least, and then I'll be able to sort of give you feedback on it. But yeah, I'm up to there. I've just got to finish dropper wires from this area along there and up to that corner where my helping hand is, and then all my dropper wires will be done, and then I can start connecting up the point motors. Okay, so I've just finished wiring up the last of all the bus wires, and I've also wired up just the frogs. I'm going to show you how I've done that, but just before, a bit of a note: when you're trimming the rods off the point motors, I'd advise using a Dremel of some kind. Unfortunately, I don't have one, so I tried a strong pair of pliers which have a cutting bit in the middle. Unfortunately, no luck with those, they wouldn't even budge. And then I ruined a perfectly good pair of rail cutters. So do not use rail cutters, they are very soft. I've eventually found a decent pair of proper cutters. These are actually electrician's ones, but using this part here, just getting a good grip on them, it will actually cut. And then I've left quite a bit protruding, and I'll probably tidy it up with a Dremel in the future, but for now it's enough for me, and the clearance is there to run trains over with no problems, because it's flush with the top of the rails anyway. So yes, bit of a helpful note: do not use the rail cutters, otherwise you're going to need a new pair. Now, the frogs, how I've wired these up, I've used these very small splice chop blocks which go from the frog wire of the motor through and then up into the actual frog, and it's got a good connection, and it also means that I can disconnect these if I need to change the point out for whatever reason, or do maintenance or swap the motor out. It's a lot easier to just disconnect and to put it back on, and yeah, so that's what I'm doing with those. What I'm going to do now is finish trimming up the rods and all the motors, and then go around and finish connecting up these point motors. So what I'm going to do is connect the positive and negative for the DCC to the DCC bus, and then I've got to run the wires from the capacitor discharge unit and the switches to the motors. But what I'm going to do first is connect the DCC up so that I can test all the track, and I can just flick the points manually because I've still yet to build my switch control panel. So I'm going to go around, connect all the DCCs up, and then I'll actually be able to test the rail. Okay, so when it comes to wiring up the point motors, I'm going to give you to keep an eye on is wiring up your positive and negative DCCs from the motor. So ignore that poor soldering. But when you've got points like this, which are basically back to back, you mount the motors back to back. Obviously, the positive and the negative for the DCC, as I've wired them round, colour coded, are back to back. So as you can see, there it goes, blue, yellow, and that one goes yellow, blue. So the point is still going to be connecting one side to the other, but where my rail here is negative and that is positive, underneath the baseboard, negative is this side of the board, positive, it's that side of the board. I just need to remember that when the switch is on this side it's negative, so yellow becomes negative and blue becomes positive. But on this side of the board, blue becomes negative and yellow becomes positive. So you can see there I've got blue and yellow connected that way round, blue to positive. On this side I've got blue to negative and yellow to positive. So just keep an eye when you're connecting them up that they do go to the right ones, otherwise you're going to end up with a short circuit or it not working. So yes, just keep an eye on that. And obviously I'm left with the 2 positives and the negatives for the switch after wiring those up, and that's where I'm going to come around afterwards. But at least with the DCC wired up like that, all I've done is just split the insulation and wound it round, tiny little bit of solder just to keep the contact in place, and then just electrically taped it round to make sure it's insulated. And that's what I've done for all those, and that's what I'll do for the rest. I've got a few more of these clips left, but not enough to do all the motors, so I'm going to do a few like this, and then I'll do the rest like that, just to make sure I've got a better connection. And I don't like soldering underneath the baseboard, it's awful. But yeah, so after that I'll have all the motors wired up except the switch part, and I should be able to then get a test, and hopefully I'll have a decision from you guys about what loco to start testing with.